Welcome back to BBC Science. Today, we would like to discuss about high altitude training with a special guest. Let's all please welcome Dr. Manu Matthew.
It's an honor to be here.
It's great to have you, Doctor.
Thank you.
All right, let's get right into this. One of the main questions talked with the audience is, what is high altitude training? Can you give us a little explanation as to what it is?
Sure. So altitude training is essentially a variation of training done at a higher altitude. It takes in less oxygen per breath than you would at a lower altitude. What this means is taking in less oxygen and delivering less oxygen to your muscles. Training at a high altitude and getting used to breathing thinner air enhances performance for athletes when competing at a lower altitude. During workouts at a higher altitude, they tend to work out a lot harder and put in a lot more effort compared to working out at sea level. The increased rate of preserved exertion is created when there is a decrease in the amount of oxygen which is delivered to the muscles to burn and create more energy. High altitude training is essentially being able to create more energy with less oxygen in the environment.
Good. Can you explain to us the biological side of high altitude training?
So the more they train in the higher altitudes, there's more red blood cells available in your body. This allows the blood to carry more oxygen. Oxygen is inhaled and diffused into your body and in the lungs. The amount of hemoglobin in the blood increases at high altitude. Increasing the amount of hemoglobin in your blood increases the amount of oxygen that can be carried. So when they compete at a lower altitude, they get a natural boost because there's more oxygen available. The blood expanding effect can enhance performance to up to 2%. I recently had the chance to talk to one of Canada's top athletes, Alex Gineste, and he was one of the competitors for Olympics. And he was talking to me about how during his workout, one of their main workouts were altitude training. And when he was competing in the Olympics, it helped him in a huge
way.
Yeah.
So how does all of this tie in with equilibrium?
Yeah, so equilibrium is when there's a forward reaction and a reverse reaction occurring at the same rate. Equilibrium responds to the high altitude training by counteracting to the low oxygen levels. Equilibrium shifts to the left for it to increase the oxygen levels, but this would mean less oxygenated hemoglobin in your blood. This is how equilibrium impacts training at a high altitude. But this would also mean more hemoglobin will be produced to carry as much as oxygen as possible. Therefore, when the athletes compete at a lower altitude, the axis hemoglobin and the axis oxygen shifts the equilibrium to the right, causing more oxygenated hemoglobin, which helps the athletes have a better performance by increase. So that's how equilibrium works. By increasing the oxygen carried to the cells every time you breathe, which means more energy is created.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So I have heard there are some effects about high altitude training. So can you tell us what some of the impacts of training at high altitudes are?
Yeah. So it takes time for you to adjust to the high altitude. Equilibrium shifts, as I mentioned before, equilibrium shifts to the left, so it needs to increase the oxygen levels. But this would mean less oxygenated hemoglobin in your blood. For this time being, you may get altitude sickness, which is very dangerous. Altitude sickness is when you're doing any sorts of activities at a higher altitude. The air pressure surrounding you is called barometric pressure. So when you go to a higher altitude, the pressure drops. Therefore, less oxygen available. During this time, you can feel things such as dizziness, headaches, muscle aches, nausea, build up in your lungs and brain, vomiting, and even hallucination.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure a lot of people benefited from the information you were giving to us today. Yeah. So it was nice to have you with us.
Thank you. It's really good that the society we live in today knows these information because you never know.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.